Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our Education Town Hall, a discussion to talk about what is going on with the public education system here in the province of Ontario. I want to start with a land acknowledgement and recognizing that we are gathering virtually today on the land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. As many of you are joining virtually from Windsor, Essex today, some from across the province, but most from Windsor, Essex. The land on which you are gathered is part of the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, which includes the Ojibwa, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. We also recognize the contributions of Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples that Indigenous people have made, both in shaping and strengthening this community in particular, and our province and country as a whole. As settlers, this recognition of the contributions and historic importance of Indigenous peoples must also be clearly and overtly connected to our collective commitment to make the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our communities, and in particular to bring justice for murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls across our country. So I'm Lisa Gretzky. I am the MPP for Windsor West and the NDP critic for Community and Social Services. But when I was first elected to the Ontario legislature, I was the education critic for a period of time. Also joining us is Marit Stiles, who is the MPP for Davenport, who now serves as the NDP critic for education. She is my colleague at Queen's Park. We have Mario Spagnolo, who is the president of the Greater Essex Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario. Mario began teaching in 2001, teaching core French, grades 4 through 8, as well as grades 3 and 6 homeroom. We also have Aaron Roy, who is the president of the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation District 9, serving high schools in the Greater Essex region. Aaron has taught geography and history, but has taught the majority of her career in special education at Western Secondary School. And we also have Maya Mikhael, who is a grade 10 student at Assumption High School in the International Baccalaureate program. And Kristen Siapis is a parent council co-chair who's getting photobombed. We have a nice visitor. She is the parent council co-chair for the Greater Essex Virtual School and the chair of the Greater Essex County Parent Involvement Committee. She has 4 children, one of them who you just met there a second ago, who attends school virtually in the French immersion program and works at the University of Windsor. So I'm going to start tonight just explaining we just want to have a conversation about the lived experience of the people who are working in the education system, the parents and the students that are accessing our public education system, to talk about what's working, what isn't working, what could be done to make the education system stronger and safer during the pandemic. And so we welcome anybody to put a comment under the Facebook Live feed. We do have some folks behind the scenes that will be sending those comments and questions to us that we can share as we go through the town hall. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Marit to start us off for the evening.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Lisa. And it is a pleasure to be with you all here, even if virtually. As Lisa said, I'm Marit Stiles, and I'm the MPP for Davenport, but I'm also the official opposition education critic, which is a role that Lisa has had actually in the past. So we share a lot in common. I'm also a mom, and I've got one daughter who's in high school. One's graduated now, and I'm really, really happy to be here with all of you. Like Lisa, I was a school board trustee for a few years before I became an MPP in 2018. And before that, I got interested in being a school board trustee because I was a parent. In my school, I was a little involved. I was concerned about public education. I really supported it, and I wanted it to be better. And I really believe in it. And I want to say, just especially right now in the last few days, they've been so difficult for so many. I mean, the whole last year has been so difficult for so many. And I want to thank everybody who's taking the time to join us tonight, and to Lisa for hosting this and putting this together, because it's so important. I want to thank the education workers that are joining us, all of you, for everything you have done this year. and to the parents who've also been on the front line, juggling so much. And I also want to thank you for speaking up and calling out the government when you didn't think they were doing enough. It really matters and it makes a difference. And a special shout out to all the students. And we have one joining us on our panel tonight. You have given up so much in the last year or more. And I don't think we talk about that enough. So I'm glad we'll have a chance to do that tonight. Just really quickly, the Ford government has done the least possible to support education in this really difficult time. And I think that when you look at what impacts the most people anytime, it's healthcare, it's education. And the government failed to put our kids and their education first. They cheaped out. They cheaped out. And here we are. All of their announcements amounted to like about 1.5 additional staff per school, if that. Expert after expert, doctors, education workers, parents, everybody has been saying we need to keep our class sizes small to keep enough distance between us. We needed better ventilation. We needed a broad asymptomatic testing program, and we needed paid sick days. And they didn't take that route. Like I said, they cheaped out. And here we are. They brought us to this place. And right now, I'm going to be honest, I think we're seeing the impact of the mismanagement on a lot of fronts and in inaction by this government. So what's on my mind right now, and I'm going to wrap up because I've got lots to talk about, lots of questions, but what's on my mind right now is how do we get to a place where our schools can be safely reopened? And then also, how do we deal with what's next? Because our kids have seen some really significant disruption. So we're fighting in the NDP with Lisa, our caucus, we're fighting for a recovery plan, for real support for our kids, for students who've been struggling, and also for the teachers and the other education workers who've been struggling with no support from this government. None. Don't believe them when they say they have. It's not there. And what's disappointing is that the government brought in a budget just a few weeks ago that actually is going to cut staff in our schools in the next year, cut supports. The pandemic's not over. The impact's not over. We're going to be feeling it for a while, and we need to do more. And so thank you again for joining us tonight. And thanks so much, Lisa. I'm really looking forward to the questions.
Thank you, Mara. And I'm really excited, along with you, to have a student on with us, to have Maya. Maya and I had a conversation. She's one of many students actually that have reached out to my office, but Maya and I just had a conversation the other day about how difficult it's been for her and her friends, this uncertainty and the moving back and forth between virtual and in school. And I've heard from many parents of how their kids who have traditionally done very well in school, how they're really struggling to keep up. So I'm glad that we have a student voice on the panel with us tonight, and an amazing community advocate, I should add. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mario so that he can talk about the experience of his members throughout this pandemic.
Thank you, Lisa, and thanks for organizing this town hall and the advocacy from yourself and from your colleagues from the NDP at Queen's Park. As I represent 1,500 elementary teachers in Windsor, Essex, I can tell you that each and every day, our educators are doing their very best to provide students with a quality program, be that in person when we're allowed, or through a virtual platform if that's what parents have chosen. Sadly, though, Ontario is still facing a public health crisis, and it seems to be getting worse. This government's failed to prevent a third wave of COVID-19, and it's left the public health care system on the brink of collapse. The government's refused to fund safety measures in public schools, and this continues to place our students and educators, and frankly, the community at large, at risk. School boards across the province have been forced once again to close in-person learning to protect students, educators, and their families, and there could have been a better way. The government has too often ignored expert advice, both in the healthcare system, as it's evident today, but also this is no different in the education sector. From day one, this government has failed to consult with school boards and teachers support staff, parent groups, student representatives. They've all been left out of meaningful consultation. And so decisions are being made, sometimes, it seems like last minute decisions that are then reversed and confusing people, mixed messages. It's chaos that could have been avoided. Elementary teachers know that in-person learning is what's best for students, and it's what we would love to do if it's safe to do so. The problem is that the government hasn't taken the necessary steps to make it safe at all times. Our union, on behalf of our members, is calling for the government to immediately provide the opportunity for educators to be vaccinated. This has yet to happen in this province. And there are other protections that this government has failed to do, and we've already heard of ventilation, but class sizes, not just for the safety of the kids, but for their learning conditions. I mean, there's going to be a gap in students and what they've learned throughout this year, regardless of the platform that they've been involved in. There is definitely going to be a gap, and it's going to affect some of our students more than others. And yet this government has failed to address that. And they could have been proactive by making the class sizes smaller. It's very hurtful to see that the budget that they've proposed, it has an almost $1 billion, $800 million cut, to be exact, for the next school year. I always say, as an example, is I think this government thinks that on Labor Day weekends, COVID is going to suddenly disappear and we're not going to need any COVID funding, which is the furthest thing from the truth. So, I'm here because I think it's important to talk about education. It's a vital public service, and we need to speak up against this government as a collective, because they tend to ignore the voices. And if we're not consistent and loud and vocal, they will continue to do that. We're going to continue to advocate for a strong public education system. We're concerned with the idea of a permanent virtual education platform in this province. We believe that the writing is on the wall for privatization of education in Ontario, and we will speak up about that as well. All of these things intertwine and are very important that we have parents, teachers, educators, and students, along with other stakeholders, to come together and to resist this government's plans. Some of it is quite public, others is in the background, but I think everybody can see the writing on the wall. So thanks for having me, and I look forward to the conversation and the discussion.
Thanks, Mario. And I think that you made one really key point there, which is the work conditions for the education workers are the learning conditions for the students. They are not mutually exclusive, and the government needs to be making decisions based on what's best for both. So I'm going to go over to Erin now, who can talk about what her members are experiencing, and then some of the barriers, which you're going to likely hear are very similar to the elementary teachers, but Erin has some other education workers within her membership that I think she can talk about as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's actually a real honor to be on the same screen with you ladies here, and also Mario and we work well together. So thanks so much. Secondary has been really tough. Also, I represent 2,000 members as the district president as well. We have 6 different bargaining units. So we have education, I'm here as a representative as education workers as well, from K to 12, even though I am the president of the secondary teachers, but we do represent the whole gambit: psychologists, social workers. And I can say that this is just the most trying year that has been part of my career. I'm sure that's true for most educators. I want to give a shout out to the ones that are in our schools this week, even though the province is shut down. We have educators that are in our schools working with our most vulnerable populations in the special education and area. And so, they're wearing PPE and they're doing what they have to do. But I do want to give a shout out to them, because it takes a considerable amount of bravery to be there, especially knowing that the vaccinations haven't been prioritized for education workers by this government. At the secondary level, it's been, like I said, pretty trying. At the high school is somewhat of a magical time. I'm sure all of us that are watching, including the people that I can see on my screen, we all have memories about high school. And so high school isn't what this year has been difficult because we don't have those memories. And I'm sure that's true of every grade, but we're not having proms. We don't have clubs. We don't have teams. And that's really the spirit of what our high schools look like. So just talk from a student's perspective, and I know Maya will do a great job. Like it's an incredibly difficult year. Socialization and being with your friends, even being able to just hang out at your locker is not something that's possible this year. And so I have to talk about the moral injury that causes among my members, because it's hurtful. And it's not what, we teach curriculum and we're doing the best that we absolutely can. And given the circumstances, given the health crisis, but there is a moral injury that's going to occur because everybody feels like we're not doing enough, even though we're working as hard as we possibly can. So, I do want to talk about how we can move forward, though, because I think we've all resigned ourselves to the fact that we're doing what we have to do. We've been rolling with the punches, and frankly, by this government, it certainly feels like punches. It's starting to feel that way, because every time we have even a second of a break, there's an announcement that there is the world upside down. Just like last week, Sunday, you have Minister Lecce saying we will be back in our schools on Monday. But the Monday after the break, and then on Monday you have the government say we're shutting down. So it's this world of not knowing what's coming next. But I'm really proud of how our members have dealt with it, and they're doing the best that they can, but it isn't without a cost. We have lost students, they have fallen through the cracks. And I'm sure that we've all watched things over the last week in our healthcare system where it's our most vulnerable that are suffering the most. So with a government that's taking money out of education in the billions of dollars, when we have some repairing to do, to me is unconscionable. We're going to have an uphill climb when we come back. And I'm telling you that our members are living on the hope that we can get back to some normalcy in September. And if that means like a fulsome vaccination plan, or even having to do some of the things that we have been doing, we won't want to do it because we do want to get back to some normalcy. And I will mention virtual schools. I think all along we were on the picket line last year saying that we shouldn't have mandatory e-learning. Here we are, we're having to do virtual schools because of a health crisis, which we all understand, but it isn't the best way to educate students. It really isn't. And in Windsor, Essex, if you open a virtual school, you're going to be taking from your community schools. You're going to lose programming in your community schools. You're going to have fewer options for kids in their community schools. And we're closing high schools like Harrow, where they lose a community school. If you open a virtual school, all you're doing is taking a few kids from each school and opening up a virtual school, which will then have an issue in all of our community schools. So I hope that everybody listening can understand that, getting back to normalcy means that we need to take this pandemic seriously, which I don't believe this government has. I want to thank the NDP for really holding their feet to the fire, because all the way along, it seems to be that it's not that they just cheaped out, but intentionally are trying to undermine some of the work that we're doing with some of the decisions they've made and some of the flip-flopping that they've done. So, our goal is to get through this school year as best as we can, and, really look forward to the future to, start repairing things, get back to some normalcy. And in my view, we need to vote Ford out. Thanks.
Thanks, Erin. Somebody said to me the other day, I never want to hear the word pivot ever again. The government is always saying how we have to pivot. But there's two really, I think, pieces of what you had said that I want to summarize. Having been a trustee, having had kids go through the public school system, is the community piece about the importance of schools, how we shouldn't be, which this government is, in a big hurry to move to virtual schools. We have to remember that there are many schools and many kids in the community whose families struggle to put food on the table or clothes on their back. And they count on, the schools. The kids go to school and they partake in the breakfast programs or the lunch programs, or clothing collections, coats in the wintertime and that kind of thing. And you lose that when we don't have our community schools. And I think that's a really important piece to highlight. And the other piece is the human side of it. The fact that, the government often almost dehumanizes education workers or vilifies them at times. But we have to remember that education workers are human beings, but they are also parents. Many are also parents. So while the government expects students and other parents to pivot and change on a dime. Like you said, the Minister of Education said schools are going to stay open, and less than 24 hours later, they were saying everything shut down. And so education workers have to figure out childcare, and they have to figure out how they're going to do virtual learning and teach and actually reach their students, make that meaningful education while their kids are also in the same house online, trying to learn. And I think that Kristen is going to be able to bring a lot of insight to that. But before I go to Kristen, I'm going to go over to Maya, who, as I said, is a grade 10 student, who can share some of her experience as a student and share some of the stories and conversations she's had with her friends about what this has been like with the opening of schools and closing schools and all this kind of back and forth.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. So hi, I'm Mikhael. I'm a grade 10 student at Assumption College Catholic High School. I am in the IB program and I'm on student council. So that has really given me like the opportunity to discuss how most like students are feeling about the pandemic. So I have a couple points and I have a couple suggestions that people have told me about. So when asked how students have been the most affected by the pandemic, everyone has been saying their mental health. I felt it, my friends have felt it, and I genuinely believe that teenagers across the province are mentally exhausted and tired of the current situation that we are in, and the government is not helping it. It's almost as if our thoughts and our quiet screams for help are being neglected and not heard of, and that's why I'm urging the government to start a province-wide council filled with students where they can collect our thoughts and opinions on what they're doing. I don't find it reasonable for a government to make choices for us when they don't really know what we're going through. And we have witnessed a mass increase of anxiety, depression, and suicide over the last year. And unfortunately, most of that comes from teenagers my age. And I think we as a community as a community of teenagers, do not feel supported enough. I think we need more mental health resources, more counselors, and more reassurance that the government has our backs. And we haven't gotten that yet. I've spoken to multiple guidance counselors, multiple school therapists, and they've all said that they've been overflowed with work due to the mental health of students, especially since like divorce rates are going up. More students need that support. School is very stressful. There's a lot. And I believe that we need to implement more programs that are mandatory at every school and hire more people for certain cases because it's honestly terrible. The programs should obviously be accessible and acknowledgeable in every class. So students know that we're not alone, because that's really what it feels like. It feels like we're alone. It feels like we're trapped, and it's terrible. And over the past years, we've been through a lot of changes. We've bounced back from hybrid system to fully online, then back to hybrid, then fully online, and back and forth. And it really just makes us feel uncomfortable. It makes us feel insecure. It makes us feel unstable. So I asked the government to pick a side. Take your pick. And if you decide to go back to school, I would ask to consider restarting full days at school and mixing the cohorts for next year. But one thing that definitely needs to come back is the semester system, because quadmesters are very short and they don't offer enough learning time. People might think 2 classes is easy, but it's honestly not. And teachers are forced to cram 2 to 3 lessons in a day. So we're able to cover everything, but it takes time to process. You know, it's hard. It's a lot of stress. And the students don't like them. The teachers say that they hate the quadmester system too. So why are they still there, right? And teachers are trying their very best to support us, which is amazing. Like, my teachers are absolutely amazing. They've been great. But enough is enough from the government. We're not robots. Like, we need that support. We need to feel secure. We need to feel stable. And right now we aren't. And another problem is also the Wi-Fi services. Like, our Wi-Fi cuts off during class. Our classes freeze up. They stop working, especially if it's during a test. It's really stressful because the teacher starts thinking you're cheating and everything. It's really stressful. So I think that the government needs to give more money to the school boards, and so they can provide us with good Wi-Fi, good electronics, and all of that. And overall, I think that school is one of the safest places to be right now. If they put in better ventilation systems and offer rapid testing to students, I think we'd be set. And we know that the government has the money to do so, but they just choose not to put it towards us. And province-wise, educational needs should be a priority, and right now it obviously isn't. And another thing that I wanted to mention really quickly is the poor elementary kids. It's terrible. Like, I don't understand how you can put a 5-year-old in front of a computer screen for 5 hours of learning and expect them to stay or listen, like that's just not how it works. And we must keep in mind that those are future high school students. So how will they learn to properly obey classroom rules and get used to a classroom setting if it's not offered to them at an early age, right? So I think we can do better, and I think we should do better, because again, at the end of the day, like, that's our future. And your job as adults and as the government is to support us, because you want the future of Ontario to be bright. And obviously, I don't think that that's happening right now. But I wanted to thank Lisa and the rest of the NDP, because you guys are amazing and you guys are really supporting us. And it means the world to us. It really does. And to parents, thank you so much for dealing with us. I know it's hard, but thank you. And for all the viewers, thank you for listening and caring. And obviously for the education workers, you're amazing. And thank you for all the support. So yeah, that's all for me.
Thank you, Maya. And I think something to keep in mind, when I became the critic for community and social services, I've had the honor of getting to know many within the disability community. And there is a saying within the community of, especially a lot of families I've met of kids with developmental disabilities, and the saying that's well used within that community is nothing about us without us. Because often decisions are made without talking to the actual individuals that those decisions affect. And I think that applies when you look at the education system and the needs of the students as well. So thank you for highlighting and reminding us all of that. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Kristen to talk about her experience having 4 elementary age children at home, probably doing and trying to work, who are probably doing what they did at the beginning of this, which is popping in and to ask questions and for some support while doing virtual learning.
Yes. It's definitely hectic around here. My husband and I are both working full-time from home. I have my 4 kids are, as you said, all in the elementary world. They start in kindergarten and they go up to grade 7. So Maya, when you talk about a 5-year-old sitting in front of a computer all day, that's my son. And it has been a steep learning curve. So prior to the pandemic, my kids attended French immersion in person, but they have been learning online for the full year, for the full 13 months that we've all been living through here. I feel very lucky to be in a place where I can support my kids in virtual learning from home, but it has made me realize all the things that you need in order to learn successfully. As Maya said, a strong internet connection, devices for each of my kids, and the right devices. We learned that for the platforms that our board and our teachers are using, a laptop is best, a Chromebook is okay, and an iPad is really limiting. And the technology that a lot of people have access to is iPads, because that's what is being handed out, the Chromebooks and the iPads from the school board. I was able to try out all of these devices before we landed on the right combo for our kids, but it made me question, how would I have done that if I didn't have access to technology, or if the technology the school gave me was insufficient? Every single family in the province is learning virtually right now, and it's impossible that they are all equipped to do so. There are so many obstacles: language, culture, economic barriers, gender, race, poverty, systemic barriers within the school system, and larger societal issues that create structural barriers for everyone. Something that I've said right from the beginning of this pandemic in my experience as parent council chair and as chair of the parent involvement committee, any barrier that families have experienced has been magnified through this pandemic. Families are facing dire situations and they are having to make tough choices. For parents, it's not a question of how can I keep my child safe, but what level of risk am I comfortable with? What are the types of risk am I willing to undertake? Do I keep my child home and risk an impact to their mental health? Do I send them to school and risk them being exposed to the virus? Parents and families with the least amount of social capital are being impacted the most. Essential workers who have no sick days or experience any combination of those other barriers. As parents, we are feeling angry, we are feeling afraid, we are feeling helpless. We are living in hotspots across Windsor-Essex. These are places where essential workers live and they experience greater numbers of social barriers. I am grateful for the support we've received from our kids' individual teachers, though. They have been absolutely incredible, rolling with changes that come from week to week, responding to our kids' individual needs, and creating safe and engaging places for our kids to learn. It took some time, about 3 months, for our family to work our way into a routine with virtual schooling. All of my kids' teachers learned the technology at different rates, and all of my kids learned the technology at different rates. There was no handbook available. It took time for all of us to figure out what methods worked best, and that came with a lot of frustrations, strain, and stress on all of us. There were plenty of emotional meltdowns along the way, from parents and from kids. Sometimes it was just a matter of giving in and crying along with them. There were some tough days, but we're all doing our best. It was a struggle to remain calm, but at that time, I felt like most parents I talked to were understanding. After the announcement of last week's measures, people went into the weekend furious. My Facebook groups exploded. I heard parents who were furious about playgrounds being closed, about heading back to virtual schooling, about enhanced policing measures. The feedback from parents, educators, and medical experts all seemed to have fallen on deaf ears. This was not what we asked for when we said we needed a stronger response to the third wave. I have a friend whose son attends a special education program, and she's in the Toronto District School Board. She speaks out often to voice the concerns that occupy the thoughts of families across the province. She often writes about her struggles as a parent, and in the past year, she wrote something that really resonated with me that I want to touch on tonight. She talks about how this past year, she has felt a feeling of surrender, and not in a positive way. Nothing in this past year has felt like a choice, she says, because choice implies that something that was actually voluntary. Accepting the limitations and giving in was, in a way, more peaceful than fighting against it. But that was before the second pandemic April came. Now, after a year of disruption and struggling to support her son, transitioning in and out of virtual schooling all year long, she says she cannot surrender any longer. You would never stand idly by and allow your child to flounder and fail if they were drowning. We cannot accept that simply because her child has unique needs and he simply doesn't matter enough to get what everyone else gets. And I want to quote her. She says, "And so we remain stagnating in the same place we were in more than a year ago. Only now I have grown to really miss my son too. I miss the kid I had before all of this. The kid who lives here now is distraught, sad, frustrated, anxious. The boy here now desperately wants to go to school. It's his favorite place, and I can't bear to tell him again that he can't have that. Slowly, I've started to grieve the loss of the kid he was able to become with tremendous work at school in the years leading up to the pandemic. This morning, thinking it was the exciting return to school day, my son packed his backpack as best he could. He tossed a full box of crackers into it, I guess for lunch, and he got his school bus seat harness and his jacket and his hat, all dressed up and no school to go to." Moments like this don't break your heart. They crush it. They pulverize it and all of its fractured bits till there's nothing left. My heart is broken because I miss my son and crushed because he may never come back. Time in this case has been a literal thief. And that's from Charlotte Schwartz. I'm so grateful to have her words to express some of the challenges that parents are facing. I think there's nothing that can compare to seeing your child struggle and not being able to help them. And that's where we are. Everybody is just at the end. Everybody's at the end of their patience. I'll admit that in the beginning, a year ago, I was happy to make sacrifices. I was happy to do what needed to be done. In fact, I was surprised at how often I would sit and listen to the premier in the afternoon and go, wow, I can't believe I'm saying this, but that guy makes a lot of sense. I think we're going to be all right. Because I love my community and I really felt like we all did. We're all in this together. We can get it done. Let's do the right things. Let's beat this thing. But I've never seen parents so angry as they were this weekend. The measures that are being put into place this week put additional pressure on parents to bend over backwards and try and keep their families safe when there are other systemic measures that can be taken. Vaccinate essential workers, vaccinate education workers, implement paid sick days so that those who are too ill to work have the ability to stay home and stop the spread. Fund education, keep class sizes small. I had hoped that by now we would be able to send our kids back to school, to get back to work ourselves. The strain of living in a state of constant crisis is becoming too much for everyone to bear. It's becoming too much for everyone, and we're at a breaking point. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you to your friend for sharing that. I think that oftentimes, the government forgets the real human impact of the decisions that they're making. They're very disconnected from the reality of what people are living as a result of those decisions. And we have some questions that came in, and I think and a lot of them are on the same theme. So I'm going to use your remarks as a segue for the first question, and I'm kind of compressing a bunch of questions together because, as I said, they're all the same theme, the ones that are coming in. And basically, it's what are we doing to protect our temporary support staff who are exposed to multiple cohorts? And what are we, let me find the other one, sorry. How can we support teams who are in person for students with special education needs when they are told that schools are not safe for everyone? So while we talk about schools being closed, that is not the reality for every education worker or for every student. We do have students with special education needs where the parents frankly need their kids to be in school. They need to have that support, but we also need to make sure that the education workers have everything that they need to keep themselves and those students safe, knowing that some of those students don't understand physical distancing, that they have communication issues. Some are nonverbal and only communicate through touch and having that interaction. Some do not either understand keeping a mask on or have sensory processing disorder where they can't keep a mask on. So I think maybe I'll go to Erin first to talk about how those education workers and by extension, those students can be better supported during this pandemic.
Yeah, and Mario can attest. We've been talking about prioritizing education workers for months, and even with our own local health unit, liaising with them to say, especially our special education workers, they should have been prioritized even like a healthcare worker because they're doing similar work that they would do in long-term care. They are, because some of them are doing toileting, they're doing physical therapies and things like that. So they should have been prioritized with people that worked in long-term care or healthcare settings, and they weren't. And so it was a constant push. So thankfully we had a step in the right direction where finally last week we were able to get some of our education workers vaccinated. But even that, it was like, who's on the list, who's going to get the letter, things like that. So there's always a constant steady push that we have to prioritize education workers, which is ultimately frustrating. The other thing that I think we could have done better now that the sudden move to online, especially because before the break, it was, we may go online, but, they weren't really, it didn't seem like we were going to go online here in Windsor, Essex, because our community numbers weren't as high as what they were at Christmas time, as an example. So, if the government would have made that decision earlier, which is always the case, that would have been helpful. So that we could have been better prepared. But I also think that also just talking to the education workers about what is appropriate and what isn't. I do think in our community, Windsor, Essex, we have a real chance of staving off the third wave from its worst. I know in other parts of the province, it's just a raging fire. But I follow the community numbers every day. I think we have a real chance of staving off the worst here in Windsor, Essex. And it might have meant having everybody stay home for a couple of weeks. We had at Christmas time, we were raging here during the second wave, and everybody stayed home the week before Christmas because Dr. Ahmed had said so. It had said to do that, and everyone did, including some of our special education community. And if a couple of weeks at home were to stave off the third wave, it may have been worth it. But nobody talks to the frontline worker. Nobody talks to the teachers. Nobody talks to the education workers about what's best for now or what they'd like to do. They're just told, here you go, wear the PPE and good luck. So, they're doing their best. I know that, you know, that I worked in spec ed for a lot of years. That is a labor of love. You do it because you love it. You love the students, you love the people that you're working with. But in these trying times where you're geared up, I know that I'm sure you've seen some photos of them with the face shields and you know, they look like hospital workers. And in my view, they should have been prioritized in that way much earlier on than they were.
And I think if you look at the families, the parents of the special education students, those with developmental disabilities specifically, those students struggle online. And those parents, it was like a double whammy when they announced that schools were being closed and students were being moved to online learning. And yet those parents were finding that they, because of everything being locked down, their support workers that would normally come to the home and support in the home weren't coming. So those parents weren't getting the support at home that they normally would. And they weren't able to have their child in school to get the educational support in the schools either. So it was really a double whammy for them. And again, many of those, I have a good friend who's a nurse who struggled with how am I going to help facilitate my son's online learning, but also meet his needs outside of school while working swing shift as a nurse and being terrified to bring a deadly virus into the house and worried about him being able to keep a mask on when he's at school, you know, and that kind of, and distance and that kind of thing. So I know that it's been really, really difficult for the staff that support the special education students, but it's been really difficult for the families as well. And that is purely a lack of planning, a lack of foresight, and a lack of investment by this government. And it started with the previous government. We can talk about historically special education being underfunded. But I mean, it's really unfortunate that they've been disproportionately impacted, the workers and those families. So on the flip side of that, I'm going to go to Kristen, and I'm going to flip that around and say, what could be done to better support parents? And then Maya, you're next. I'm going to ask what could be done to support students.
Well, I think, you know, there's no easy answer for this. I know that parents want schools open. They want their kids to be able to learn in a safe environment. We all know that that's the best place for everyone, especially, you know, like the friend that I commented on in my remarks earlier. There are families that are in dire straits right now that need their kids to be back in the classroom, and it's not safe. Or parents like myself who at least have the ability to keep their kids at home and do virtual learning, but it's dragging on and dragging on and dragging on. And you have to ask, where is it going to end? When can we get back in the classroom? When is it going to be safe to start to reopen? And how can we help that process get better? The advice seems to be clear from educators, from medical experts. Get essential workers vaccinated, provide sick days, provide the opportunity for us to get back to work safely. And I think that's what everybody wants.
And Maya, what do you think needs to be done in order to better support students?
Okay, from a student's perspective, first of all, mental health, we need those resources. We need them. We need the support. Before this meeting, I asked people from my grade, I asked my classmates, I asked both classes that I was in, and everybody said we need better mental health resources and we need to know that they're available because we don't feel like our mental health is being taken care of enough. Another thing is we need the government to pick a side. If you want to go into hybrid system, stay in hybrid system. If you want to stay online, stay online. Take a side. Don't keep switching us back and forth, because that's really what's been ruining our, like, it's so inconsistent, and we need a voice. We need to be heard. We need the ability to feel that we are wanted within our community, that we have a voice, because you have to keep in mind, we're the future. We are the future you. We need that voice. Sorry, I keep saying that, but it's true. Like we need that voice. We need it. And yeah, I just feel like schools should be open. Personally, I believe that in-school learning is better. We're not learning enough. We just like the 5-year-olds, I'm sorry, but personally, if I have a class that's going on for 2.5 hours, do you really think I'm not going to look at my phone? That's right next to me. So like, you just have to look at both sides. I don't know. That's my personal opinion, but I just think we need a voice.
Thank you, Maya. And you actually answered my next question, which is what it's like to be going back and forth from in-person to virtual constantly. So you got to that before I could ask it. Another question that came in, Mario, maybe you can address this. What are we doing to protect our temporary support staff who are exposed to multiple cohorts? And by extension, that means the students and their families are exposed as well.
Well, I think the answer is vaccinations, one layer. The other thing is cohorting is a term that the government has used, but in reality, there is no cohorting in elementary schools. From day one, and I've been very vocal about this, we've had Rotary teachers, be it that provide preparation time to our teachers, if they're French teachers or phys ed teachers or teacher librarians. They've been going into up to 5 different classes every day. So, if you're talking about cohorting, it doesn't exist. Secondary, I can't speak to. I know that they've done a better job of cohorting, but in terms of elementary, I mean, there is no such thing. So vaccination would have been one thing. Aaron was bang on. We talked about this with our local board back in January. If the priority was to have schools open for students with special needs, then the priority needs to be, it can't just be said, there's got to be action with that. So what was done to make that happen? Between January, February, and now we're in April, really nothing has happened. We're still fighting to get level 2 masks in some of these schools where there's in-person special education instruction. Like, think about that. Like, how inappropriate is that? Where we had to fight last week, I know OSSTF did in the background, to just get level 2 masks. We're not even talking about N59 masks, N95 masks. Sorry, I'm getting my numbers mixed up. But that's what's happening in education, is we have to fight tooth and nail, and then we're termed as whiny teachers that are complaining. Well, we're complaining because the funding's not there. I've always been told, if you're looking at the priorities of the government, look at the budget. Well, when you have a government that's starting to make cuts in education, you can tell where their priorities are. It's not in public education. And as Aaron said earlier about, going on strike against the online learning, the writing is on the wall, folks. This is what the government is trying to push in. So frankly, there's a lot that can be done for temporary support staff. There's some temporary support staff, quite frankly, that will not come in to cover because their lives are at risk. We have not properly addressed their concerns. And so we're going to pay them basically minimum wage money to come in and put their lives at risk without the proper PPE. It's unconscionable in the province of Ontario that this is happening. We shouldn't be having to fight for vaccines. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous that we have to argue to get education workers vaccinated. And on the other hand, we say that in-person learning is what everybody wants. Well, if everybody wants that and we all agree to that, so what are we doing to get to that goal? We've failed. We've completely failed. And when I say we, I say the collective we. It's the government decision. But as a public, like, overnight, through our lobbying, through Kristen and her parent Facebook groups, pushing back on the government for those playgrounds to reopen, that was changed over 24 hours because of the reaction that people had. The paid sick days, the NDP have gone so hard on this for months, for years, and we haven't been able to convince the government. And frankly, I think that's on all of us as a populace, that we haven't pushed back on the government hard enough. Because if we did, they would have reacted, and they've ignored us. And we need to do more, because that could have saved lives. Basically, it would have saved lives. So I think, when I'm given the opportunity to speak, I say, well, what should parents do? You need to contact the Premier's office every single day if that's what's required, because that's all that they will react to. They will not react to Andrea Horvath's questions daily. Unfortunately, they're ignored, but because there's not votes there. But if the people reacted like they did over the weekend, and justly they did, that was every parent was up in arms about that, and taking away our civil rights. Like, that's what was happening. And so we reacted swiftly and strongly, and the government had to back down. And that was a beautiful thing in the province of Ontario. And the Premier has been hiding and missing in action since then. And that's what we should have done from day one in this pandemic. And we could have been like our eastern provinces, in a bubble, much better protected. and closer to a normal as we would want to be. And sadly, we're not there. And I won't give up. And I know the people on this call won't give up. And I hope the people watching us on Facebook will not give up and take the time tonight to call the Premier's phone number and let him know that what is happening in this province is unacceptable and it's at their hands. So I don't know if I answered the question there, Lisa, but
You did. I'm just going to tag on that if you call the Premier, he's currently at home self-isolating. He had a negative COVID test, but he's self-isolating as he was told to, and he has paid sick days.
Exactly.
He's getting paid while he's at home. So you can give him a call or an email and expect him to respond. And if he doesn't, you contact him again. I have a comment that I wanted to read out here from Rick. It says, you would not allow your child to spend that much time in front of a television, yet they are supposed to sit them in front of a computer monitor for the same amount of time. And I think that that is.
I want to talk about that a little bit. Can I comment on that?
Absolutely. But Chris, can we tag onto that? Because I had a question I was going to pitch to you and Aaron. So we'll wrap it up in two. So if you can comment on that, that would be great. And if you can tie that into my question, which was going to be, what is it like as a mom, as a woman who has children at home while you're trying to work and they're trying to do virtual learning and you're dealing with, like Maya said, them sitting in front of a computer screen for hours.
Yeah, I'm so fired up about this. I was going to jump on you before you even asked the question. I'm so sorry. I do want to comment on this because I know from talking to all of my friends and people in my Facebook world and reading about all the articles and all the things, every parent is experiencing this pandemic in a very different way. So we're all trading stories. Like, what's it like for you? Well, you know, it depends on how many kids you have at home. It depends on how strong your internet signal is. It depends on whether or not you're working and your husband's working, or if they can go to an in-laws, or if they can, you know, if you have the support. There are so many things that have to come together in order for you to create a school inside your house. And I think personally, I think we've done okay. It's taken us months to figure it out. As said earlier, it took us about 3 months to get through to the point where the kids really understand the routine. I mean, when you think about what it's like for a kid to enter school for the first time, you know, when they enter into kindergarten and then we have them going into grade 1, there's a whole transition piece there. It takes like a year before you're ready to do regular school. And the same thing is true for virtual schooling. It took us a long time to transition to the point where I can say now we probably have a routine that's just balanced neatly. We can get through the day. I can set up my kindergartner over here and my grade 3 over here. And if I need to, I can be in a meeting and I can do a math test at the same time. And I know when his breaks are going to happen. And then he comes out and I give him a snack and he goes back in. And it's air traffic control around here all the time because all 6 of us are on 6 different schedules, doing 6 different things, trying our best to achieve the best that we can. And I will say, when I look around and how difficult it's been for me and the toll it's taken on my mental health, and I've got anxiety through the roof like I've never had before. Where is that coming from? All of these things that are happening, I only understand my own little bubble. I can't even imagine what it's like for so many other parents. But when we trade that information, I know that it's different for every single person. And the factors that need to go into a successful day, strong internet connection, the ability for everybody to work on their own devices, a quiet place for people to separate and have their own meetings. If you have several people living in like an intergenerational household, I couldn't imagine how you would even get that done. If you had a situation where you had parents and caregivers who are outside of the house during the school day and kids can't make their synchronous meeting times, I couldn't imagine what it would be like if I was working outside of the house and my mother-in-law had to try and figure out how to get my 5-year-old or my 8-year-old onto French immersion school. Like, it would be impossible. There's so much of this that's completely broken. So I come to you as a parent who has just barely figured out how to balance so that it doesn't fully explode on a daily basis. But the balance that you have to strike to get there is so neat. It's so delicate. And it's impossible to think that parents across the province are reaching that with any degree of success. And if they are, it is not without a complete toll on their mental health. So that is what I can say about that. It's working okay. It's a lot. Hopefully we survive it, the sooner we can get back into class, the sooner we can reach a sense of normalcy, to feel supported, to feel safe, to get connected with our friends and with our educators in our school community. I do want to say schools it has come true to us. Schools are so much more than just a place to receive education. And this pandemic has taught us so much about that. They are community hubs. They are places where we have parent-to-parent connection, where we have student-to-student connection. They support our mental health. They support our economy. They support people who have food insecurity. They support people who have income insecurity. They connect people with the resources that they so desperately need. And I can't imagine what it's going to be like if we have to live in this world for very much longer, because as I said, we are at a breaking point. It is not sustainable to live like this. We need action. We need to get into a situation where we can be supported, where we can open the schools back up safely, and we can get back to the place where we're supposed to be. So yes, that is the world is crazy for us right now. That's the parent perspective.
Kristen, and I think after you saying that, I'm sure that this weekend when the government said they were closing down playgrounds, I heard all of the parents in my neighborhood screaming into the pillow,
Huge.
thinking my kids are inside all day trying to learn online while we're trying to work, and you know they need to be able to go out and burn off some
saving grace to be able to send them out, and that you can't. Please don't take that away from us. It's the one thing. Yeah,
they have to be kids. They have to be kids, right? Erin, maybe you can add on, and then I'll go to Marit to kind of wrap it up and talk about this and kind of what she's hearing across the province. But Erin, you are an educator.
I am, yeah, and that's where I want to start. I'm a mom, and I'm coming from a place of privilege because I am an educator. I have a supportive partner that works from home, and so many women in this province don't have that. They don't have the resources, they don't have the capital, they may not have somebody at home to help them out. So I'm coming from, and for me, there are days where I feel like a complete failure as a mother, and I'm sure that every woman feels that, because even in my own household, you talk like Kristen said she has 4, I have 2. The experience for my kids moving to online, the best place for them is in school. I mean, I'll say that they flourish there. But when they moved to online, I have my youngest seems to be able to kind of duck to water somewhat after some time. But my older one he has ADHD. He's medicated. You know, at the end of the day, what I find is like empty goldfish cracker wrappers on the ground and like bits of like eraser that's around his desk, because he just can't. Because he needs that activity. So if there are people listening out there, there are days where I feel like a complete failure as a mother. I'm working, you know, there are times I'm like, hey, I have a meeting. You need to just go entertain yourselves and things like that. It's incredibly difficult. My husband's been working from home for over a year. And so that's been difficult. And, you know, every family's had their ups and downs. So, you know, to echo the sentiments of Kristen, like, you know, we all want the same thing. And what Mario said, we want the same thing, but we obviously the government hasn't prioritized it, because we would get there. We would have schools open. We would be able to get there. So we need to work towards that. You know, I'm just hoping everybody's able to stay safe and healthy. And I just want to thank everyone for the opportunity.
Thank you, Erin, and I appreciate your honesty. It means a lot, and I know there's a lot of people across the province that are feeling the same way. A lot of mothers feeling the same way. And Marit, on that, I'm going to hand it over to you. So maybe you could talk about kind of what you're hearing from across the province, both from the education workers and parents, because I know you're hearing from a lot of parents across the province.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, I sure am. And, you know, a lot of parents, a lot of students, a lot of education workers, teachers, and a lot of what we heard tonight is really similar all around the province. You know, I have to say, and, you know, just on the note we just ended on there with Erin and Kristen, like, I think as a parent myself, like, I think we all struggle, right? About, you know, how we are supporting our kids enough. And we know that that everybody doesn't face the same challenges, right? It's not equal, right? We know that, but it's still hard. It's hard for every one of us. And we always have that doubt, I think. And so in this moment, it's become so concentrated and so difficult. And we've seen, you know, our students, our kids, we know that the evidence is there that our kids are struggling with depression, anxiety, you know, mental health challenges. And And as parents, that's really devastating because there's not many supports out there. We know that. And for students, of course, too. And I also really wanted to just reinforce what Kristen said about, how much we learned, though, about how important schools are, how important our publicly funded education system is, how critical it is to our communities, to our families, to our economy, to our health. It's so important, and it's so frustrating, I know, for all of us, especially at a time when we can't really get out there and protest and things like that, to have a government that just so clearly doesn't value it. It's really frustrating and hard. And I know everybody feels really helpless. That's the other thing I hear from a lot of people right now. And I do want to say, like, that push to have them reopen the playgrounds, that was so important. And I think it was a good example, like you said, Lisa, of like how we can make change. We have the power. Don't underestimate what a difference it makes when everybody's calling Doug Ford's phone. Now, we found out today that he's a little bit technologically inept. There was a news story circulating that his aides are saying they had to show him how to use a laptop at home because he's isolated there. And I think, well, goodness gracious, how many times has he told us all, and it's no problem putting your kids online, or go ahead, the online registration system for vaccines, it's no problem, it's easy, it's great. It's like, you haven't done anything. You've never even tried. So don't give us that. And I just wanted to, I guess, end on the one little note, which is like a future looking thing, Lisa, because a few weeks ago, the government sort of let it out that they are going to be introducing this online learning program permanently. So what we're doing now, they want to make that permanent for some kids, right? For the option. But the truth is that's kind of makes a lot of sense to me, because this government has shown like they want to save money on education. So they want to cut, and they've already told school boards, expect that you're going to have to cut teachers and other staff next year. So they're not heading at all in the direction we've been talking about. They're going in the opposite direction. They're talking about keeping kids online. They're talking about cutting supports for our kids in schools. And that's just, I think really clearly what I'm hearing from across the province is we all know that's not the right direction. So we have to keep pushing back really hard. And we'll do it at Queen's Park. We'll keep doing that at Queen's Park. But I think it's really important that we also have all the parents, all the students, all the education workers working together on this. And that's what's going to make Doug Ford back off. That's what's going to make Doug Ford back off. Well, thank you all for everything you're doing.
Thank you, Marit. And there's the saying that the greatest equalizer is in education, right? And so what we need to be doing is building a public education system that breaks down their barriers. There are indeed barriers still even in the public education system, but we need a government that's going to invest in the education system to break down those barriers, not create a system where the education kids get is based on the bank accounts that their parents have and their ability to buy into it. So I want to thank you all for tonight. I know we could talk for a long time, but we don't want to encourage people sitting in front of the screen for 5 hours like the government is encouraging children to do. So thank you, Maya, for bringing the student voice, and thank your friends, because you and I had talked the other day and you shared some stories, and it's really important that the students speak out. We had some comments from elementary age students as well about how difficult this has been for them. And it's really important that the kids do speak out, because you will be us someday. I have no doubt that Maya might actually be in my position someday. And Kristen, thank you for sharing your perspective and for sharing your friend's story as well. And for having that guest appearance at the very beginning. Kids are always great to bring to the Zoom meetings. Mario and Aaron, thank you. And thanks to every single one of your members for the incredible work that they're doing. There are people out there that appreciate the work that they're doing, and we know how difficult this is for them as well. This is not easy. You put in a lot of overtime when things were normal, and the amount of work that you have to do now to make sure that the kids are getting a quality education and they're doing so safely, on top of trying to support your own children. It's a heck of a lot of work, and we do appreciate that. And Marit, thank you for taking the time to join us today. Marit was in the House today when the Conservatives once again voted down paid sick days. And once that debate was over and the vote was done, she hopped on and joined us. So Mart, I appreciate your time and thank you for the work that you're doing and for connecting with people so closely across the province. I really appreciate that and being their voice at the Queen's Park. Thanks to everybody that joined us and for all the comments that we've received. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to get to every one of them, but you're always welcome to email with your comments or your questions and we'll try and get back to you with a response. So with that, I'm going to say good night, everybody. Get off the computer.